let's go on with knowing the seriousness of when you are going on calls for hospital containments. And I'm gonna present the flash drive, the presentation to Claudia later. I'll pass it over to her because maybe the print may be a little too small, but you'll be able to have that to look at the presentation on, so this way you're able to see things happening. So, as I say, this is the sexual assault response team training, and we're gonna go into reading, if you don't mind, reading by page, what happens when,
I don't think it works.
I think most people have had to use a laptop.
Pardon me?
I think most presenters have had to use the laptop, but that thing doesn't really work.
because we were always using this one, and I was always able to,
Because as far as we know, they always say the clicker doesn't work.
Yeah, no one's ever used it since we've been here.
there were even with the clicker,
Mm-hmm.
that's how
They
weird.
just use the
because I used to
laptop
do this
to-
before. Oh, hey, not even, here we go.
Don't ever say.
Okay.
Never say never.
Never
Say never. Okay, so who wants to read this? Sonia, you want to read the first page?
Sure. The first program having key features of the Sart model was established in 1975 by the Memphis, Tennessee Police Department through a federal grant. The program was called the Rape Crisis Center. In a 1986 formal report to the National Institute of Mental Health, the program was described as having a director, 3 counselors, 10 nurse practitioners, a laboratory technician, a secretary, and 45 volunteers. The report states that the early focus of the program was on the medical examination and evidence collection. This program is recognized as the first sexual assault nurse examiner team in the nation. The NIMH report, however, makes it clear that coordinated interviews took place between the city police, county sheriff's department, and the same team. In addition, the victims could receive examinations without the law enforcement agency involvement. Before the grant expired, the program was transferred and made a separate bureau under the City of Memphis Executive Division for reasons of budgetary protection. Although not formally identified as SART, this program had the components of the SART model.
Okay, that was one of the areas. Okay, then let's go on to the next one. The continuation of the history. Diana?
In California, Laura Slaughter, MD, in collaboration with nurses at San Luis Obispo County General Hospital, started the first SART in San Luis Obispo County in 1980. This team conducted joint interviews. The team consisted of law enforcement officers, sexual assault advocates, and on-call physicians. According to an early description, the physician conducted the exam, gave the report to the officer, and testified in court. The team, which galvanized the SART movement, was started in Santa Cruz County in 1985 under the leadership of the local Rape Crisis Center and District Attorney Arthur Danner III. Art Danner has received long-standing recognition as a district attorney in tuning the field of victim advocacy. According to an early report, he was also concerned about losing sexual assault trials due to problems with forensic medical evidence. He consulted with the local Rape Crisis Center and formed a task force in 1985. The task force invited Dr. Laura Slaughter, medical director of the San Luis Obispo County SART, to present their model at a meeting in Santa Cruz.
Okay, now we're going to find out about Santa Cruz. Go ahead.
The Santa Cruz Task Force also uses the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiner program in Houston, Texas. The Houston program used registered nurses with advanced training to conduct the forensic medical exam for patients 14 years of age and older. These nurse examiners were on call to the hospital, collected the forensic evidence, provided a report to law enforcement officers, and testified in court as expert witnesses. After the research was completed, the Santa Cruz Task Force combined the 2 models and implemented the first SART in California. The Santa Cruz team was awarded a grant to fund a part-time then full-time coordinator, Sherry Sart. The first coordinator is credited with organizing and implementing the SART same program in Santa Cruz. In 1986, the first SART Institute was held at Cabrillo College. Team members were trained and began official operations in 1987. The Santa Cruz team also established the SART Institute in 1986 to train other countries on the model. The early relationships with Degree of College establishing a training institute with an innovative and progressive approach to certification outcomes.
So see, different areas started their own SART or setup, and so that's the way we started. So in regard to what are the first steps in developing a SART, Monica?
Understand the mission and goals of SART. The mission of SART is to encounter the experience of sexual assault with a sensitive and competent multidisciplinary response to support efforts to restore the well-being of the victim and bring responsible persons to justice.
And continue.
Yes.
Second.
The goals of SART are to ensure competent, coordinated, and effective intervention, provide a sensitive and caring response to survivors of sexual assault by all disciplines, ensure complete, consistent, and accurate case investigations, ensure the provision of medical and forensic follow-up care, provide crisis intervention and follow-up counseling referrals, effectively support the mission of the criminal justice system.
The primary partners in successful SART are the Rape Crisis Center, area law enforcement agencies, County District Attorney's Office, Crime Laboratory, Sexual Assault Forensic Medical Examinations, County Victim Witness Assistance Center, and area hospital representatives.
So if considering the people that you've been getting the trainings from, you've had somebody from the district attorney's office, which was Gloria. You had Moses as the police department officers. You have, or will be having during the time that maybe you're going, well, I don't think when you're doing the site visit, you'll be seeing the nurses from San Gabriel with your Presbyterian. But you did see the forensic examiner when we went to VIP. So those are the people that, and the, later on we'll identify the hospitals that you will be going to. And that those are all the primary partners in regard to a successful examination for the survivor. Okay, and
Other-
also, we have, go ahead.
Other agencies playing important collaborative roles are Children's Protective Services, Adult Protective Services, and County Health Department.
The Children's Protective Services comes in when there's been a child that has been assaulted, and then as soon as the report is taken by the police officers, then they coordinate with the Children's Services, and then they will have somebody either come over to the hospital to talk to them about what has happened to the child, and or they will go over to the station and speak to the family in regard to what has happened. So those are these agencies that play a very important role in regard to this sexual assault. Okay, then, let's go on to training guidelines for hospital accompaniments.
Training guidelines for hospital accompaniments. The sexual assault program of the East Los Angeles Women's Center is funded by the California Office of Emergency Services. As part of our contractual objectives for fiscal year 2017-2018, we are required to provide accompaniment services to 250 individuals required this type of assistance.
Has that changed, Sonia, or is it still the same? 250?
It's what?
The total 250? Has that changed, or is it still the same?
I think it's still the same right
Okay.
now, as far as I know. So-
Okay.
Our job is to offer support and advocacy, which means the following: listening and empathizing with the survivor's feelings, reducing the isolation, fear, and humiliation of the experience, educating the survivor of her rights throughout the investigative and judicial process, helping address the issue and concerns of the survivor in a practical manner, explaining the medical examination and criminal justice system, assisting the survivor in dealing with family members, law enforcement officers, medical examiners, and legal personnel, ensuring the survivor's needs are met to the fullest extent possible, providing unconditional support and acceptance. The advocate is the only person not involved in investigating or collecting evidence.
So what do you feel so far in regard to what the responsibilities are for a survivor and what your roles are gonna be for a survivor? Pretty intense. You know, that security, that the emotional support that you're gonna be giving to the survivor, and the information that you've received on the district attorney's office for the police, All that is very, very important to be able to be confident in speaking with the survivor. And once she feels and sees that you're, interested, that you're concerned about her, then she's gonna be able to relax. Because she's been speaking to an officer, she's been speaking to the nurse, she's been speaking to so many people, and you're there for the emotional support for her. So yeah, it's very, very important for her or him, depending upon who the survivor is. Okay? Go ahead.
Training guidelines for hospital accompaniment and singing. Definition: accompaniment services are defined as escorting or meeting face-to-face with sexual assault clients at appropriate places of their choice. Accompaniment services must be provided for sexual assault victims to hospitals, law enforcement agencies, district attorneys' offices, court proceedings, and other agencies or locations according to the needs of the client. Requirements: staff or volunteers providing these services must have completed the 65-hour volunteer advocate training and must participate in monthly in-service training. Our role is to provide the support that the sexual assault survivor needs at the time he or she is brought into the hospital.
And in regard to the definition where it says that accompaniment services are provided for the victim at hospitals, law enforcement agencies, district attorney's offices, a lot of times maybe if the survivor was assaulted and it was past the 72 hours in which time there is evidence collecting, that if the survivor is wanting someone to be at the police station when they are talking to the officers, that we can go over to them just as much as if it's a anytime day and or night. If they decide they want to make a police report, then we can be there for them, be there emotionally for them. Just sit next to them, we don't get involved in communicating anything other than being there for their emotional support. Okay. And then let's go on to the instructions for responding to a call.
During your shift, you are expected to be ready and able to respond immediately to the hospital with the East Los Angeles Women's Center service area for an accompaniment. You must be fully prepared to go out during the entire shift, although allowances will be made if you cannot respond during the last half hour of your shift. Remember that the survivor is waiting and that we must respond to the hospital within 45 minutes of the initial request. Document name of the caller, name of the agency, hospital, the phone number, and time call was received on the accompaniment fact sheet. Find out which Sart hospital you will be responding to. If the hospital is located out of the geographic area, you will need to refer to the Rape Crisis Center in that area. If there are any questions regarding situations that are out or our responding area, please feel free to contact your supervisor.
And in regard to the importance of when you receive a call and getting the information as far as the officer who's calling you, or for instance, there's the phone number, that in the event we'd like to have you get the phone number of the person calling. So in the event something, God forbid, happens, and like with me, my car almost didn't have any battery, and when I was able to, when I was going on a call, so this way they will keep in tune. So this way we try to get there at about the same time that the forensic nurse is at the hospital, and the survivor and the officer. So this way when the nurse, continuing on, when the nurse is doing the interview, there's a lot of questions that she's being asked, and we don't want to be coming in midstream, or we wait until the survivor has finished speaking with the nurse in regard to the questions and details of what happened during the time of the assault. So we try to make it as soon as possible, within 45 minutes from the time that you get the call to the time that you go to the hospital. And a lot of times, it's always very, very, very important, please have your GPS set up for it, because a lot of times, I don't think I'm gonna get a call. It happens. Just make sure that, you maybe do a dry run, and I know you are gonna be doing that. But just, have, your clothes ready, things, set, so this way when your mind, your psychological mind and everything has to be ready for it. When you're on call, don't think it's not gonna happen, because then it happens. You have to be emotionally and psychologically ready for the survivor. So yes, it's very, very important that we follow through and we're there for the survivor. Okay? All right, Nick? Yes.
Do we have to do a separate training for the hospital accompaniments, or it would just be today's session?
These are the instructions, but when you're gonna be going with Claudia to do the site visit, she's gonna show you the area. But what you're gonna do is you are gonna be shadowing Claudia and her Sonia. And then depending upon the frequency, then as far as your comfort level of you going by yourself, then you'll be going by yourself.
It's gonna be
Sonia?
one shadow. That's what we found, that we were getting too many and we were doing too many, so we are, because we checked at some of the centers, how do you do it? Some of them say, they go on call, they've been trained and they go. They don't shadow. So we will do a shadow. We have a couple people who are not gonna be shadow who've done it, but we'll do the one shadow, because if not, you tend to lean on that person and then you don't really, no, I'm not, I need somebody to go with me, and it'll keep going. So we're gonna do one shadowing of that, and we're always there by phone to be able to make that, always call us by phone, we can walk you through anything, and we can go out if we need to.
Yeah.
Something's going on, we can go out.
Mhm. Yeah, and yes, in regard to, a lot of times you feel you can't do it, but then when you're there and you see the survivor,
Yeah.
Your instincts just happen, you're there, and you're there emotionally for the survivor, so yes, it's, you're, like I say, as you're going over there, emotionally thinking about, you don't know what to expect, but just know that each person, her energy and your energy are gonna be working together to help her, in whatever capacity she's in. Maybe sometimes she may not wanna speak, maybe she will wanna speak, sometimes they rattle off forever, and sometimes they won't. If they feel that they don't want you in the room during the examination, that's fine. Just say you'll be outside, you'll be in the waiting area, and a lot of times, because the fact that they don't know what's gonna happen during the time of the examination, that they're overwhelmed, so they're not even listening. So you just say, and a lot of times they feel that you're saying thank you for waiting for them after the examination, and yes, okay, they'll be able to listen to you, because there's a lot of stuff going on with them. So, yes.
I just wanted to say that the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of children, aging from 3 to 11. And so that's a whole different way, and that's when you're gonna be focusing on that parent. The parent is there, the nurse is there for that child, but the mom is the one that the parents are the ones that need that support, so that we shifted a little bit. And
I noticed one time I had, there was this one mother when it was her daughter, and I went in, and as soon as I went in, I introduced myself, which is part of the protocol, which we'll talk about, and she said, well, I don't want anybody. Who called you? And I said, we're an advocate from the center, and that we're here for you and for your daughter. Well, I don't want anybody. And this was at Whittier Presbyterian. And so, okay, fine, and so the nurse, forensic nurse, she asked that I stay outside, in the waiting area until the examination is over, and then when the examination is over, just go ahead and they'll be able to leave, say goodbye and stuff like that. But the mother was really adamant. But then I found out that the little girl had been assaulted before. And so, there was other issues, and the mother was very defensive, so you can understand.
Did she talk to you ever?
Pardon me?
Did she talk to you after that, or did she stay with that?
Very, very like she just didn't want to have any part of us being anywhere around her. So I think it was Jennifer who said, can we, it's a policy that you be outside the room, in the waiting area, and once the examination is over, then you're able to leave. So that was the first time I had ever experienced. She was very what are you doing here? Who called you? Well, I don't need to talk to you. So she was very defensive, and of course, after when I found out why, that she had previously, the child had been previously assaulted, so the mother had already gone through this before, then.
Did they have an advocate the first time it happened?
Pardon me?
Did she have an advocate when the daughter was assaulted previously?
She must have had a very bad experience before.
Yeah.
So it continued on, so she was very distant with the nurse too. So I don't think even though, and the rooms between the examination and the waiting area, a lot of times you can hear. So I could hear the way that she was answering the forensic nurse,
Mhm.
and it was very, very cold, very distant. And she wanted to hurry up and get the report over with. So, and the little girl was being a little girl, you know, but, yeah, the mother was very adamant. Yeah, okay? Okay, so let's go on to, what is it, finding out what time the nurse, I think we can go over that.
Instructions for responding to a call for accompaniment. Find out what time the SART nurse and officer or sheriffs will be arriving at the hospital. Inform SART nurse and officer how long it will take you to arrive at the hospital. Ask if the survivor and the doctor have given permission for you to come and assist her. Survivor must give authorization to speak to a counselor. You may want to ask if you will be able to meet with the survivor in a private place. This may not be possible, but you should be aware of what to expect. Remember that you are on equal playing field with the nurse and responding officer. The only person who has more say than anyone else is the survivor. Ask if clothing is needed. The SART nurse will ask you to look in the area where they have clothing and get clothing for the survivor. Remember, safety comes first.
And in regard to the area where it says, you know, you may not have a place to talk to the survivor, a lot of times the two places that you're gonna be going to, San Gabriel there's two rooms. There's a room where the family or the survivor will be, and then there's another room for the officer. At Whittier Presbyterian, the forensic examining room is there, and then the little room right next to it. A lot of times, if you're wanting to speak to the survivor by herself, if the officer is in there, you can ask the officer if there's an area outside of, further down in the hall that they can sit, the officers can sit in that area during the time that you're talking to the survivor. Because a lot of times, you know, to speak confidentially to a survivor, they're not gonna feel comfortable if they have the officers in the room. So there is a place in San Gabriel and Whittier Presbyterian that if you feel you wanted to speak to the survivor by herself, even a lot of times if a survivor has a family member there, you ask them, you know, you'd like to speak to the survivor on her own, and this way, she's able to speak to you. Because a lot of times maybe they want to say something, and maybe it's a mother or whomever, and they're not able to. Yeah, Christine?
I had a question, because we're dealing with like law enforcement, and I'm just anticipating like maybe the officer isn't just nice to the survivor, and has there ever been a time where the survivor wanted a different officer? Can you address?
We've had sometimes that we've had situations with the officers, and in one of these slides here, it will tell you that if you have a discrepancy with the officer, if you feel the officer is not the greatest person in the world with the survivor, you take down, especially with some of the information that you're gonna be putting on the fact sheet, is gonna be the officer's name and his ID number, and then what you will do, then you will call Sonia and or Claudia and tell them, you know, the situation with what happened to the survivor, and then they'll talk to the watch commander of the station, and they'll find out what happened. Because we've had situations that one time one of the advocates called me in the morning and said that the officer, it was like 4 or 5 in the morning, that the officer wanted her, the advocate, to take to the survivor home.
Oh, no.
And that's not what we do. And so the officer is really, I won't say, but anyway, so we brought that to the office of the station's, information to the watch commander and say that this was inappropriate, and that, we do not transport survivors.
Okay.
So can you kind of go through like the steps of, so we'll get a call from the police department or the hospital?
It'll be either.
Okay, and so the survivor will already know that we're coming.
The
They will ask
survivor is
them.
told,
Okay,
I believe at the time that they're being transported to the hospital, that there'll be somebody there at the hospital that's gonna be an advocate for her. Sometimes at the police station, let's say for example, if there's no forensic examination, a lot of times we found out that they ask the officers will ask the survivor, would you like an advocate? And then they say, know a lot of times because they feel that it'll take them about 45 minutes for us to get there, and by the time it took for them to even come to the station
Mm-hmm.
to file the police report, and by the time we would get there, that it would be too long for them. But they are to notify them that when they
Okay.
come to the hospital, they'll be, because a lot of times the officers, because a lot of times the officers don't go on sexual assault calls very often, so they don't remember what to do. You know, they're involved with the survivor and hearing the story of what happened, and, you know, they're very much emotionally attached to the survivor during the time of that this is being reported.
Mhm.
So sometimes, maybe, a lot of times, I think Whittier Presbyterian, PIH, they end up, the nurses will end up calling and say, okay, we'll call to make sure, because sometimes I've gone to Whittier Press and I'm sitting there and the officers comes in, they say, oh, you're the nurse? No, we're not the nurse. And then it takes time for them to call the nurse on duty, and then for that nurse to be able to come. And Whittier Presbyterian has a lot of nurses that go to various hospitals, San Pedro, Pomona, so it may take, depending upon the time of day, that it'll take the forensic nurse some time to get there.
Hmm.
So they always feel best to know that, you know, if they call, then they know we're gonna be there.
Hmm.
So it
Okay.
just depends, but it's either forensic nurse and or the officer who is taking the survivor to the hospital that will be calling you.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so what's the role of a counselor?
When introducing yourself to the survivor, introduce yourself. Body language and eye contact. Tell her your name and the organization that you represent. Explain that she has the right to have an advocate present to offer her support, information, resources, and make sure that her rights are being respected. Ask her if it is okay for you to stay. Inform the survivor that anything she says is strictly confidential and cannot be repeated to anyone without her permission, unless she describes thoughts of suicide, homicide, or a situation of child, elder, or dependent adult abuse, in which case, unless you are mandated by law to report if given enough information. Offer to contact a support person if the survivor is alone. Inquire if she has any questions or needs anything before beginning.
Okay, so what happens during the interview?
During the interview, support and validation. May ask if survivor needs a break, water, etc. Do not answer questions for the survivor. You may be asked to translate for a Spanish-speaking survivor, but under no circumstances can you provide translation for law enforcement or medical. If the survivor has told you something in confidence and does not want you to reveal this to anyone else, you must respect her wishes. We are acting on behalf of the survivor, not the hospital or the law enforcement agency. Confidentiality is essential.
Sometimes I've had experiences where there is, the person is Spanish speaking, and what they've done is they call either one agency, one area will have an interpreter, you know, they'll call a number and they have someone interpret for the survivor. And others will have an officer from the station interpret, you know, they'll do an intercom, and they'll have that officer interpret for the survivor, so this way then that information will be given to the forensic nurse, not to us. You cannot interpret any way, shape, or form anything in regard to a language other than maybe when we're in the examination room with the survivor, that maybe the nurse is needing maybe her to move a certain way or something like that, yes. But as far as anything relating to the case, we are not, no way. Okay, so how about the role of the counselor advocate?
Role of the counselor advocate. Dress code when responding to the hospital. No, no. Please dress comfortable. However, a professional appearance is required at all times. You cannot wear open-toe shoes such as sandals, flip-flops, etc. This is neither professional nor safe. You could expose yourself to accidentally stepping on hazardous or contaminated substances on the floor. No shorts, strapless, or revealing attire is acceptable. No strong fragrance, perfume, or cologne. Please do not bring any guests with you. If you so, they must wait for you in the car. Remember that your role is one of an advocate. You will be providing advocacy services, crisis intervention to the survivor. Advocacy is defined as the process by which rape crisis counselors intervene with other agencies and individuals on behalf of sexual assault victims in order to achieve a particular goal or result desired by the victim.
Okay, and I think there was a duplicate. I mean, I think I added it, so the second part is on the first part. Okay, so we can, if you wanna line that one up, fine. Someone got in there in between. Okay, so then, this one, there's a question.
This one is in question. You may need to clarify with the hospital contact that you are a rape crisis counselor advocate and that you will be providing support and information to the survivor. Remember that you will not be conducting any type of psychosocial evaluations for the hospital. If the medical personnel want a psychiatric or social work evaluation, they must contact their mental health provider. Do not hesitate to consult your supervisor at any point in responding to this type of request. If you as a counselor on call are unable to respond to this request, it is your responsibility to notify the supervisor.
Okay, so, what's Sart?
A sexual assault response team, law enforcement, medical examiner, advocate, prosecutor. The mission of SART to counter the experience of sexual assault with a sensitive and competent multidisciplinary response to support efforts to restore well-being to the survivor and to bring responsible persons to justice.
And that part is very, very important, just as the rest of the people that are involved. Okay, then? The same rule?
Same's role as sexual assault nurse examiner or sexual assault forensic examiner is a specially trained healthcare provider who provides a sexual assault forensic exam. The same will conduct forensic exam as an objective fact finder, provide exam findings to law enforcement and district attorney, and possibly testify in court. Prosecute.
My goal is SART. Give survivor medications to prevent STDs and prevent pregnancy. Provide written aftercare instructions regarding follow-up medical care, terminology, staying, and other medical personnel will refer to the survivor as the patient throughout the exam. Advocate's role, focus on the survivor, empower the survivor. Survivor has more power than anyone else in the SART. He can decide whether to report, where to do exam, who should be present.
Okay, so let's take a minute. There's a lot that's been said. So is there any questions in regard to what's been said so far? Yeah.
So what
Yes.
is the actual difference between a counselor and an advocate?
I'm sorry?
The, like, differences between a counselor and an advocate? I know a lot of it's grouped in, same duties, but.
An advocate, the counselor probably would be more in detail of maybe coming for counseling.
Okay, well, yeah, that's what I figured, it's more of like a, you need a degree for that, right? It's not like a.
Yeah, the advocate, yes, primarily because, you know, we can go ahead and we're there emotionally for the survivor, but we don't go into full detail
Right.
in regard, other than whatever the survivors wanted to talk about. A lot of times it may be that, like I was saying, maybe they want to talk, maybe they don't want to talk. We're there for their emotional support, but we're the advocate role.
And there's a difference also between a counselor and a peer counselor.
Okay.
So the peer counselor is, that's kind of how we came about doing this work,
So
being
it's just-
that peer counselor, so not
Sort of
necessarily a
synonymous.
counselor that you could, so that's why we call it counselor advocate, because, but it's more of an advocate role.
Okay.
But, the counselor piece comes in, and that comes where you, when you've done this a while, it becomes like peer counselor, and that's when we, will go to our trauma, our director, to be able to deal with issues, anything, any guidance that we may need, anything. We went on a call and, you know what, this came up, and so it's a lot of what you get from the experience of going out to these. So that's more like on a peer counselor role, but it's more or less than that.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions so far? I know there's a lot. I know you've had 3 sessions last week, and it's kind of like, ooh. So like I'm saying, you know, please, you know, any questions during the time that this is happening, because I know we're reading it, But just know if there's something that is not, that you're not able, that you're not understanding, that's what we're here for.
Just to clarify on the provide written aftercare instructions, is that something the hospital will provide us to give to them, or the hospital gives to them?
Okay, you're gonna be given packets, you'll be having packets that will be given to the survivor that has a lot of referrals that will identify on one side, there's information about our services, their legal information, there's an indication of the services that we have available. And then there's gonna be a little, it's kind of like a little medical card. It's going to identify the police station, because a lot of times, because of what they're going through or have gone through, they're not gonna remember anything. And if they're needing information for what's happened to them later on, after the examination, or after 2 or 3 days or a week after, when things start settling down, because she's gonna be going in for speaking to the officer. Of course, she did that. She's gonna be being re-interviewed by the detectives. And then if it turns out that she needs to go to the district attorney's office because they feel that there is a case, that's, a lot of things are going on. So the more that's written down for the survivor for later on, the better it is. So on that little medical sheet, it'll have like the name of the officer, the police department, the name of the officer.
Oh,
And
So this is the one that Carmen made very nicely, because I never carry all this, but it's great. So this is what Carmen's telling you about the one that tells you all of the information, so you can give it to them, so they'll know. They'll know who the advocate, who the police officer, what the case number is, and this is really helpful. So when you talk about aftercare, I think that's when, this is one of the books that we can give them. We have them in English and in Spanish, and it talks all about a guide to healing and recovery. So, all of our stuff is the emotional piece. The nurse will give her the aftercare physically, but this is the emotional piece. And it's victims of crime information, Marcy's Law, and our.
yeah, and like Claudia will be talking about Marx's Law and all that. I'll let her do that later on. But all that information, because a lot of times they're not gonna remember anything. And sometimes maybe they end up, sometimes I've had, there was one person that came in that one of his teenagers had had an examination. And so he asked her where was it done, everything relating to it. And then he said that what she did with the material, because he wanted to maybe help her, because whether or not she was gonna get counseling or not, she ended up throwing everything away. She didn't want to have anything, she just put her stomp on it and just go back to going to school or whatever, but she was just too overwhelmed to even consider getting counseling. So then I ended up giving them a package and telling them, if you feel that she's needy, because they were out of our service area. So, I gave him the referral information, because I think she was a high school student. So I guess maybe she didn't want her mother to know, whatever the case scenario was, that we had that, given her that information. Yeah, that's the reason why they're not gonna remember. And make sure, I think some of the ones that we're trying to do, Sonia, I think were the medical paper, we're gonna go back to regular paper, because the hard fund, a lot of times the pens when we're writing them, it doesn't go, it's very light. So it's hard to read, so we're just
Which
gonna.
one's that, Carmen? The heart?
Yeah.
The little card,
Yeah.
that one? Oh.
Yeah, because it's a couple of times when I was going with the girls, their pens were very light, and you'd have to really dig into it, so, and probably financially it's better.
Yeah, just make a photocopy,
yeah.
photocopy.
Yeah, so it'll be a package, but as much information for the survivor when she's settled down, that'll be a lot better for her. And she can always call. And the information that you're gonna be putting on your fact sheet and things that will be important for her case will be available for her in the event that she needs to call to get back, because maybe she's thrown things away, maybe for whatever reason, any information that is required on the fact sheet, that information will be in the database, and when she calls back, then we'll be able to give her that. And sometimes even the officers, sometimes they call and want to maybe identify who was the officer who was on the call and what his ID number was. Because every case, it needs all that information. Okay? So advocacy, and I know sometimes this may have been repeated several times, but just know that the advocate is the only person not involved in investigating facts or collecting evidence. Terminology in advocacy, we use the term survivor. So what is the role of an advocate when it happens? Shall we continue?
Crisis intervention, explain rights, educate and dispel myths, explain exam and legal process, and provide info and referrals.
And what else can you survivor? What else can you do?
Provide support to the survivor and significant others, answer questions, assist in conveying survivors' wishes and concerns to law enforcement, fame, and, or significant others, hold hand, hug with permission, and believe.
What is not the advocate's role? The advocate cannot handle evidence or equipment, stay in the room alone with collected evidence, translate between survivor and law enforcement or sane, transport survivor, physically restrain survivor, express doubts about survivor's story.
And just know, I know that the hospital where you had the visit, a lot of times even from other trainings, you know, LAC is not, I mean, very cold, very, it's not as the other, you'll notice the difference in the hospital between LA County and San Gabriel and Whittier Press. San Gabriel and Whittier Press are smaller, more personal, there's colors, you know, have a little more comfort level for the survivor than the county. So just know that every hospital has its own decorations, its own way of hopefully helping the survivor feel a little more comfortable, okay?
I have a question. On the top where it says hold hand and hug with permission, that's like after they're done with the examination or when they're getting
Yes,
ready?
after the examination, after the nurse has done the swab, collecting of the evidence of their hands. And anytime, you know, a lot of times maybe they feel that they'll want to have water, or they'll, you know, we do not do any of that. We do not, unless we speak to the nurse. Is it okay to give her water, you know, depending upon how long ago the assault happened? You know, you always check with the nurse.
Because they swab them out, so you wanna make sure that they're able to get and swab it. Regardless, they'll always swab it, so you wanna make sure that they've done that already. And I think the holding the hand and the hug, I think that really is, you'll know that when you get in there. I tend to not, because they've just been through that trauma, but there are some that just, when they're getting the exam, they've wanted to just have their hand, you know, held or just kind of, you know, and so we go by kind of what they say, you know, it just depends. It's not something that we do as much, because
I
we know what
noticed
they've been through.
sometimes too, the nurses will, you know, do the swabs on their hands. So yes, it's best not to do any contact with them, because sometimes too, if you were to go to hug them at the beginning, maybe they're gonna be collecting the clothes.
Yeah.
So your DNA is gonna be on there too. So wait until after everything is done and she has been cleared of all the DNA checking points, that then it is okay. And by that time, maybe then she will want to be, you know, want some kind of contact, you know, because of the fact that what's happened to her. But yeah, let's just wait until after the examination is done, and it'll be safe for everybody. Thanks, Monica. Yeah. Okay, so let's go for what the definition, again, I believe advocacy is.
It's, advocacy is defined as the process by which rape crisis counselors intervene with other agencies and individuals on behalf of sexual assault victims in order to achieve a particular goal and result desired by the victim. Connecting with a hospital social worker, speaking with significant others, and diplomacy, how do you say that word? Diplomacy is key long-term benefit to survivors.
I wanna add something to that, Carmen.
Sure.
That sometimes when it says speaking with significant others, we remember that, that what they tell us is really confidential. So whatever they tell us where we may want to say something to, whether it be the parent or the spouse or whoever it may be, to remember whatever they told us in there is confidential and we won't repeat it. So that's where you have to make sure that we understand that because of confidentiality. So the, speaking with the significant other is also to help them get through it and help them know what to do to deal with that, you know, whether it be child.
And I think not necessarily, I don't know if it, in what area it is, but it says that if someone, it's only there's confidentiality if it's just between you and the survivor. If there's a third party in the room, it's not confidential then.
Right.
So as far as the confidentiality, if we're speaking to the parent, if they have a child, does that extend to whatever the parent tells us? Because obviously children, we don't really speak a lot with the children, do we?
We live, if they're at an age that they're, you know, they're talking,
Right.
it's up to
But
them.
does that confidentiality extend to the parent since we're technically their advocate during?
How much, considering Sonia that you've been doing quite a few children, how does that
A lot
work?
of children lately.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't, usually I have the parent tell the officer. I feel much better, cause I don't wanna get caught into a web like that, so I really let the parent know to tell the officer. And usually, I never really hear much that the officer doesn't know from the parent.
Right,
Usually the parent doesn't know, especially when they're small children. So we're talking about something that happened that the parent wasn't there and the parent didn't know, so there isn't a lot that's there that we hold that. Now, when you're talking 12 and up, that's a little bit different.
Okay.
When we talk to a teen 12 and up, whatever they tell us, that becomes confidential.
Okay.
That doesn't go with, we have to tell the parent, or we have to, it doesn't. When it comes to sexual assault, it
They
does
have
not.
those rights
The 12 and
regardless of
up,
age.
they have, yeah,
But is it that 12 and up like officially, or is that
Yes.
just because of,
no,
okay.
that's official.
and you know what's really difficult is because, like Sonia's saying, the 12 and over, there was such a case where I had two sisters that their children, they're in an apartment, you know, one on top of one on the other. And the girls were, the cousins were being assaulted by the man who was the boyfriend of the sister that lived on the bottom apartment. And so, the mother of the daughter who was assaulted on the upper floor, she was asking me questions about, you know, well, you know, what happened to the niece on the bottom floor, and I said, you know, I have, you know, that is something that you're gonna have to speak to the officers, you know, we do not get involved, you know, that's confidential, and if you're wanting to speak to them, that, you know, we're not privy to that. And a lot of times what is it, they'll ask the mothers, if the mothers or fathers go to the exact, you know, to the station, I'm sorry, to the hospital with the survivor, and then once the examination is done, a lot of them, they say, well, is she a virgin still? You know.
Yeah, that's a big question.
Oh, the parents will ask
Oh,
them?
yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
and,
What do you say?
absolutely, absolutely she is.
Give it away.
you
You
know,
know,
she's, it was not
you know,
something that.
She gave away.
Yeah,
Right, yeah, and a lot of times they'll want, especially, you know, when the nurses, when the examination is done and you're talking to the family and the nurses, you know, doing, collecting the evidence and getting things packaged for the survivor, I mean, for the detect officer, that, you know, they'll be looking at us and they'll want, like, they'll want to tell me something, you know, and, you know, that's not something for us, that's not what we're there for.
and the
We're to
nurse
be
will tell them
emotional.
usually about what they, I had one the other day and the nurse told the mom that, you know, she was fine, that she didn't show any damage to her hymen, which that's one of the things, first things they look for, because that will tell how much they penetrated. So the nurse will tell them, you know, if they found something or if they didn't find something, but that's the nurse that will tell them
Yeah,
that.
anything medically, anything like that is between the nurse and the parent of the child or teenager, depending upon, you know, the child or the case scenario. But yes, yeah, it's like they're wanting so much because they've never experienced a situation before. We hear a lot of times like, oh, wow, you know, this is, you hear about this happening to someone else, but hey, it's happening to my daughter, you know? Who would ever think that this would happen? And then especially if it's with a family member. Because a lot of times, maybe and after a survivor a teenager has indicated that this has happened from an uncle or whomever, and then, you know, they're talking, they're speaking, and they say, you know, why did I end up saying anything? Now it's gonna make the family separate. No one's gonna be talking to each other, we're not gonna be having Christmas together, we're not gonna be having, you know, holidays together because of what I just did. Not knowing that, you know, it is good, they were brave enough to come out and say this has happened to them, because who's to know, he might have been doing it to several. And a lot of times that has happened, until somebody comes out from that family environment or family group and find out that they were not the only first person that was assaulted by an uncle, father, or stepfather. And so, yes, it's very, very hard. So a lot of times, you know, it's very draining, but you're there for them. Okay, so let's go for the advocacy as far as advocacy at the same staff. Okay, I'll let you guys read. It's, you know, we're really a guest at the hospital.
She was gonna read it.
And so try to stay out of the way during the examination. And by that I mean the nurse and the forensic nurse and the areas where she has the evidence, where she's collecting the evidence. We stay away in regard to be opposite of where the survivor is laying down. We're on the right side, and we're primarily from this area up, and just keeping away from just, you know, as much as possible. Because anyway, you're close to maybe, you know, evidence, you're close to the evidence, that you're always away from that area. And so also you can do advocacy for the law enforcement, and whatever, you know, if you converse with the law enforcement, it's not like he say, she said, or what, you know, what did you come out with from the story that she's told you? No, respecting that. And like I say, most officers and detectives are very professional. And I had said before, in the event that you have a problem with the officer, don't confront them, get your information, and then notify your supervisor.
What does advocacy for the law enforcement, I mean, what an example of that? What's
Advocacy for the,
Well, I think it could be like explaining something. You know, like the officers may be asking certain questions. Like I had one last night, and I explained to her that the officers were gonna be asking her a lot of questions, and a lot of them may be a little more than she wants to share.
Oh, okay.
But the reason that they're asking that question is because they're asking that question so that they can get more on that person that did it. So if they find him, they can get more counts on it. That's why it's important to say, how many times did he penetrate you?
Right.
So that they know that each one is another count. So that's kind of a way that we help out in that way, by explaining it to them, so they kind of have a little idea of
Okay,
what's gonna
gotcha.
happen, why they're doing it.
okay, then in regard to, what's the law enforcement's role?
So law enforcement's role, survivor's immediate safety, interview and document statements of survivor and witness, document, collect, and preserve all crime-related evidence, investigate the crime and prepare a report, identify and apprehend perpetrators.
Confidentiality. California State Law, Evidence Code S 1035 to 1036.2 protects communications between rape crisis advocates and survivors. Eligibility to participate in the client confidentiality privilege is conferred upon those who work in a rape crisis center and have completed a minimum of 65 hours training. The survivor is the holder of the privilege of confidential communications. If the survivor has not given consent to advocate to release confidential information,
The advocate must claim privilege. Communication between the survivor and the advocate is only confidential if no one else is present.
This is a big one, confidentiality, because not just anybody can hold confidentiality. So being a rape crisis center and taking this training and keeping up with your hours that you need to keep up your training, that will make you hold confidentiality. Some people will come and take the training and then we won't see them anymore and think that they hold confidentiality. They don't. It goes out the door the minute that happens, that you leave what you're doing here. So confidentiality is something that you could have somebody who does a training who's gonna, maybe help somebody, but it doesn't hold confidentiality. Victim witness, they can go and they can assist and they can be there, but they don't hold this confidentiality. So this confidentiality is very important for us to hold on to.
Okay, so the exception is immense risk of suicide or homicide, suspicion of abuse, neglect of children, or any elder abuse. So if you feel that during the time that they are feeling overwhelmed, that they maybe want to hurt themselves, if they want to maybe feel that they're gonna do something to someone, or if there's any abuse of an elder or a child, that is not kept confidential, that is to be disclosed. I know a couple of times when I was over at Whittier Presbyterian, the girl, the survivor, was during the examination was done and everything, and then she was waiting in the waiting area, and then she said that she came out and she said that she felt that she wanted to hurt herself. So then finding out, then I spoke to the nurse, and then we had there's social workers, there's doctors, there's emergency area, that they went and then they were going to be doing an eval on her, so that once the exam was finished, then the officers then she was taken downstairs to the ER, and then they were going to analyze, evaluate her, and then she was put on a 5150. And then during the time that she was telling me that she felt that she was wanting to hurt herself again, then we found out that she had been to College Hospital a couple of weeks before. So see, that wasn't discussed during
She was already having suicidal.
during the time of the assault. So we didn't know that until if she wouldn't have brought it up, we wouldn't have known. But then that's when you have to work with the forensic nurse, and then that's the same with that will happen also at San Gabriel. They will have somebody that they'll have the survivor go over with the officers to the ER, and then the evaluation will be done. And I know a couple of times that happened, and then later on, what we do after the hospital accompaniments, 2 or 3 days later, in which we get back with the survivor, we find out how they are, and considering knowing that this person was going to a hospital after the 5150, that she went back to College Hospital, and then so I just triggered my time frame to call her in a couple of weeks, and she was very happy that we called her, and that she was going to continue getting therapy out of College Hospital, so then she was going to be coming to us. But it's very, very important, as soon as you get and finish the fact sheets for the hospital accompaniments, that you turn them in ASAP, because we need to call them within 3 working days for them to get counseling. Very, very important.
Carmen, what's the question?
No, just I was gonna ask, is 5150 still 72 hours? Is that, yeah? Okay. That hasn't
Yes.
changed.
So who would we report this to if, for some reason, they would say, I'm gonna kill him, or something like that? Like, in the confidential, obviously, between the survivor and myself, and then it's like, for some reason, she's just like, I'm gonna kill him for doing this to me.
Well, that's when you bring it up with.
Yeah, you take it with your
The nurse.
supervisor.
Right.
You're gonna talk to your supervisor, because the nurse that's not harming herself. If it was harming herself, that's when you go to the nurse and you say, if she says, I'm gonna kill him, a lot of them feel like, I'm gonna kill him.
Right.
If I find him, but a lot of that's when you take it to the supervisor and let them make the call of what to do. If they're out to do something, then we need to try and work with them.
And really
Right.
mean to do it,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because that's something that they,
Would
Feel.
that not necessarily also be related to the officers?
I was gonna say, what you tell the officers?
well, I wouldn't just bring it up to the office, depending on how she says it, I wouldn't put her at risk like that.
Mhm.
I wouldn't bring it to the officers and put it at risk. I mean, if she sounded like she was really had a plan and she was ready to do that, then maybe, but I wouldn't put her at risk, because then what that's gonna do is that's gonna turn it around, so that they start looking at her as a criminal or a threat,
Mhm.
you know, so I haven't had anybody like that, you know,
Okay.
I've had, you know, yeah, they're angry, they're mad, they're
Right.
this and they're that, but I haven't had anybody to say, I'm gonna,
Okay.
you know, go.
And it's usually the family who wants to do that.
Yeah, it's more the family that wants
Yeah,
to.
I mean, because, yes, yes,
Right.
there's quite a few that end up, the family's the one that really wants to do, especially, let's say, God forbid, it's the father whose daughter,
Mhm.
teenage daughter who's been raped and things like that. Yes, you have to feel like you're ready, you almost wanna hold him down because he's just very
Mhm.
emotional.
Of course, yeah.
He's not really listening to you,
Mhm.
because of the fact of what's happened to his daughter.
Okay, I just wanted to bring up a scenario if in case it
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, because even this one, not too long ago, there was this survivor here in the local area that this had happened to her, and the father he was very, I mean, he wasn't really listening. He was just so taken by the fact that this had happened to her,
Mhm.
and knowing later on that when I was speaking to her by herself, that she was also having other issues beside what had happened to her. And I think this has just made one more thing for her father to worry about. The
Mhm.
mother didn't come to the for the examination, didn't come to accompany the daughter, but I think maybe because of the fact that she had other children at home.
Mhm.
But the father came and I think it was like, oh boy, one more thing in relation to what the survivor is going through. Oh, yeah.
You mean like other mental issues going on?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes. So, yeah, very much reason, yeah. So, let's go for the next thing. So during the accompaniment, what happens during the examination? You're there to give them support, validation. You engage in small talk, especially maybe during the time that the examination is being done. Maybe you try to distract her, maybe ask her what she likes to do. Try to, because, it's very overwhelming, just try and make it as comfortable as you possibly can during the time that she's being examined. And then like bedside manners, sit at the head, and in the event that she wants you there. And as I had mentioned when we were there at LEC, that a lot of times when they were showing that, how the survivors is scanned with that dark
Mhm.
light and everything, that always make sure, and they'll always have the curtain closed. So if the survivor wants you in with her, then you're in with her. If not, you'll be opposite the screen, opposite the
Okay.
curtain. So this way, her privacy, her body is being covered. So what happens after the examination?
Office clothes and a shower, may talk more, give referrals, discuss options, help determine where the survivor can go and help if shelter is needed, obtain survivor contact information, and discuss follow-up procedures.
And usually now, even though we have a shelter, the shelter is, for our shelter, it's a 24-hour shelter. It's not one that will house anyone over 30 days. So in regard, we try to, then if she feels she's needing in a shelter, then we'll talk to housing over to the hospital and check with them and see, they will then somewhat do like an intake and speak to her and see if she would be able to be in our center until we're able to move her into another area. But a lot of times, sometimes we've had cases before where we did not have a place for her, and it was very hard trying to get a shelter in the middle of the night. So, thank God we have the shelter now. But, thank God that's available. We'll have, when we're doing hospital accompaniments for the ER, that'll play another big part in regard to what happens with the survivor in the event that the survivor is not able to go home. Okay? Okay, so what about the forensic nurse?
A forensic interview takes approximately 30 to 60 minutes. Forensic examination and discharge instruction 30 to 60. Nurse finishes documentation, drawing of all evidence, packaging and labeling. Report and evidence given to police after looking the evidence. Total victim time 2 to 3 hours.
And that also will vary. Sometimes you have like, let's say for example, you're called. Sometimes the nurse is taking a longer time to get to the hospital. Sometimes you have the nurse who is training someone else. So that's another extension of it. So it's sometimes you're there, it does not take you very long, and other times you are there for a long period of time. It's not set in stone 2 to 3 hours. It could be sooner, it could be later. Just be prepared to maybe have some water, something to hold you over in the event that it's going to be a longer period of time. And how about self-care? Shall we?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Congratulate yourself on bringing comfort, support, validation, hope to someone during an extremely difficult experience. Take some time to debrief, treat yourself to something special, and practice good self-care. Accompaniments can be extremely difficult and emotionally draining. It's okay to debrief. That's what staff are here for. Always feel free about calling your supervisors to debrief at any time of day. We are here to support you.
And we are good at that, right, Sonia?
I
Yes,
need
sometimes
several,
it's
I
like-
need several of these times for myself right now.
Yeah, sometimes when we're driving home, it's just like, yeah, it's challenging. So in regard to the penal codes that, for notification of counseling,
Penal Code 264.2, notification of a counseling center, mandates law enforcement shall immediately notify the local rape crisis center whenever a victim is transported to the hospital for any medical, evidentiary, or physical examination. Penal Code 679.04, right to advocate and support person, mandates a victim of sexual assault has the right to have a victim advocate and support person of the victim's choosing present at any interview by law enforcement, district attorneys, or defense attorneys.
okay, so that's my part. And then from then on, it'll be Claudia. Even though all this information is, that I have on here, is what Claudia's gonna talk about. It's in regard to victims' bill of rights, Marcy's law, and all the information that is gonna continue on from here. So, are there any questions, or is there anything that anybody would like to ask me? Because at the very end of this presentation is my email address, my phone number. If you want to talk to me or ask me questions, if you think about something, my number is available and I'm available for you. Okay? Thank you.